Hey there. I'm glad you showed up to watch this, and I'd be even more delighted if you hit that subscribe button. Honestly, it would mean more than I could say. Anyway, let's get started. We staged the evening like it was ready for a lifestyle magazine. Deep red wine breathing in tall crystal, candlelight scattering shadows across polished china, boards stacked with ribbons of prosciutto and wedges of aged cheese. She sat at the opposite end, commanding the room in that emerald dress I'd given her for our second anniversary, the one she'd claimed wasn't her taste, but somehow never let go of. The glow caught her eyes just so, and for a second, I was caught, adrift, until her voice sliced through the comfortable murmur. "He's lucky to have me," she said, breezy and amused. The kind of throwaway remark people dress up as harmless, but that finds its target like a dart. Everyone laughed, everyone except me. For an instant, I wondered if I'd misheard. Still, I joined the laughter, thin, brittle, while my stomach plummeted like I'd stepped off a ledge. The joke wasn't clever, but the ease in her delivery, smooth, almost elegant, made it sting like a velvet-wrapped slap. Something in me shifted. My gaze dropped to her hand beneath the table, brushing against the wrist of the man beside her. Greg, my co-worker, my so-called friend, the one who'd been finding more and more reasons to stop by lately. I fixed my eyes on my untouched Merlot, took 3 measured breaths and asked evenly, "Sorry, what was that?" The chuckles stuttered to a halt. Angela turned toward me, her smile a little too polished. "Relax, David. Just a joke." I leaned in slightly, resting my elbows on the table, my tone still warm enough to sound civil. "Funny. Looked like your stand-up routine came with props." A strained laugh escaped from somewhere down the table. Greg cleared his throat, his hand retreating. Angela's smile thinned. "Don't start." "Oh, I'm not starting," I replied calmly. "I'm settling in." The air drained out of the room, even the background music seeming to turn itself down. Angela straightened in her chair, tilting her head the way she always did when readying for a fight. "You twist things. You make everything uncomfortable." I nodded slowly, my jaw tightening. That's rich, coming from someone playing footsie at her own anniversary dinner. Her eyes flicked around the table. "David, not here!" "Why not?" "Seems like the perfect setting. We've got wine, witnesses, and a guy brave enough to flirt with a married woman in plain sight." She pushed her chair back hard enough for the legs to screech across the floor. "You're embarrassing yourself." I stood, deliberately slower. I'm finally seeing things clearly. I left without slamming a door or raising my voice. That was what hit her hardest. I didn't shout, didn't beg. I just walked away with the steady quiet of someone already halfway gone. Upstairs, I sat alone in the dim bathroom, the muffled party sounds fading through walls and distance. My reflection wasn't shocked, just resolved. Angela had always been magnetic, the kind of woman who drew eyes without trying. I preferred the safety of routine, morning coffee, orderly commutes, tidy boxes to tick. I wrote insurance policies for a living. I stayed inside the lines. But that night, the lines dissolved. The glamour, the perfume, the casual betrayal. It shook something loose. Hairline cracks I'd convinced myself were harmless now felt like deep fractures. When someone you love shows you their true self in front of everyone and smiles while doing it, what else can you do but take note? Stay close. This is where the ending begins. The next morning, the house felt unnervingly still. Sunlight slid through the blinds as though nothing had happened. Angela was still sleeping when I stepped into the bedroom, hair spilling across the pillow, one bare leg tangled in the sheets, like she hadn't just gutted us hours before. I lingered in the doorway longer than I should have, watching her breathe evenly, as if her dreams had skipped right over the wreckage. I went downstairs and made breakfast. Eggs, sourdough toast, avocado mashed with lime and sea salt, topped with the sprig of cilantro she liked. My hands were steady. Habit carried me. When I returned with the tray, nudging the door open, she stirred and gave a faint smile. "Morning," I said, the words hiding the shards of the night before. What time is it? A little after 8, I answered, setting the tray beside her. Thought you might enjoy breakfast in bed. You were the main act last night, after all. She smirked, missing the weight in my tone. You're sweet. That's what they say. She stretched lazily, but my gaze no longer lingered the way it once had. The hunger was gone. Only clarity remained. I drew up a chair beside her. Need anything else? She shook her head, reaching for the toast. Number this is perfect. I glanced at the brass reading lamp by her bed, remembering how it wobbled when she moved her books at night. Familiar, predictable, just like betrayal. As she ate, I adjusted the lamp, slipping a small black lens into the base, a piece of hardware I'd taken from the garage. It clicked softly into place. She didn't notice. You really did put on quite a show last night, I said lightly. Her brow arched. The party? The performance. She gave a short laugh. I might have had too much to drink. Maybe, I said, but the crowd seemed entertained. She rubbed her eyes. Honestly, I barely remember the end of it. I do. I let the silence hang, then brushed a strand of hair from her face like I used to. She smiled faintly. Still my husband, she murmured. For now, I thought, but only said, eat before it gets cold. I left without hurry, steps measured. Downstairs, I poured a second coffee and watched the neighbors rake their lawns. From the street, our house still looked perfect. Trimmed hedges, spotless brick, the image of stability. But inside, something had shifted. A fault line was forming quietly beneath us, waiting for its moment to break wide open. She didn't know it yet, but from that morning on, every word, every sigh, every midnight call in satin would be captured, every piece of it. I kept the memory card untouched for 3 long days before I dared to open it. It wasn't fear, not exactly. More the need to face it without a pulse of feeling left. Revisiting the ruins of your own life takes a certain patience. It's like walking through the ashes of a house you saw burn. You don't rush, you don't mourn, you just tally what survived. Late Thursday night, once Angela had drifted into her wine-heavy sleep with the low murmur of her favorite podcast carrying her there, I slipped away to my office. The door shut behind me with a muted click, the lock turning in a quiet, deliberate way. I roused the desktop, slid the card into its slot, and waited for the screen to light. Static shimmered for an instant. Then the feed came up, our bedroom in clean, sharp detail. The audio was clear enough to make the room feel as if it were holding its breath. The first night looked harmless. Angela propped in bed with a paperback, shifting pillows, thumbing through her phone. Nothing to note. Night 2 told another story. At 11:23 p.m., she answered a call. Her voice dropped into that careful, guarded tone, the one meant to keep me from catching the words. A soft laugh, then a man's name I didn't know. Miles. I'd never heard of him, but I recognized the way she said it. That softness used to be mine. She told him she couldn't get away that night, said I'd been clingy lately. Then she laughed again, adding, he's harmless, a good fallback. Fallback. The word echoed like a slow toll, touching every memory. Our trip to Asheville, the barefoot spins in the kitchen, the night I held her after her mother's funeral. All of it rearranged by a single cutting label. On the third night, she didn't call. He came instead, slipping through the side door with the broken lock I'd never fixed. They didn't kiss where the camera could see, but he stood close while she packed an overnight bag. His hand brushed her wrist. She smiled and murmured, he has no clue. Brought me breakfast this morning. It wasn't mockery. Mockery would have been cleaner. This was worse. The bland dismissal you'd give an old armchair. Not worth anger, not worth excitement. Just there. I kept watching. Hours passed. When I finally shut the window, my hands were steady. My eyes were dry. It was simply confirmation. She wasn't a stranger. She was exactly who she'd always been. Someone who saw me as part of the scenery. That night, I lay on the couch staring at the ceiling. Whenever my eyes closed, I saw her mouth form those words. He's harmless. Fall back. By morning, I'd built a routine. Coffee, office, footage. By the fourth day, I'd gathered 3 more clips. All carried that same soft, intimate tone. Always for him, never for me. In one, she leaned back against the pillows with her second glass of wine and said something that hit like a stone dropped in my chest. Even if he finds out, he won't leave. He needs me too much. It wasn't only about her. It was about me. I'd lived on the belief that if I stayed constant, gave openly, and waited long enough, people would choose to remain. Watching those recordings, I realized my steadiness had been read as dependence, my quiet as surrender. And for the first time, I had no urge to prove otherwise. I only wanted to walk away. It was a gray Tuesday morning, coffee cooling beside me, when my phone lit with a name I hadn't seen in years. Elliot Trammell. Back in Denver, we'd worked side by side until he left to start his own firm. We'd drifted apart, as people do. I picked up and his voice came through unchanged, direct. "Still allergic to change?" A laugh escaped me, strange in my own ears. "Depends on what kind." "I've got a role," he said. "Senior audit lead, mostly remote, but you'd need to move back to Denver eventually. It's yours if you want it." "Yes," I answered without a pause. He hesitated. "That fast?" "I've already been thinking," I said. When the call ended, I stayed there for a long moment. Not thrilled, not nervous, just set. I didn't tell Angela. No point. She went about the house as always, not noticing that I'd started observing her movements like evidence. I saw how seldom she asked about my day anymore. Something inside me shifted. I took up running again in the mornings, not far, just enough to feel my lungs pull in air. I carried myself taller, spoke less. When she tossed small, cutting remarks my way, I didn't bite. I only watched. By Thursday, she was studying me at dinner, head tilted as if I'd become some puzzle. "You've been different," she said. I sipped my wine. "We all change." She gave a small laugh, but it caught in her throat. She didn't know I'd already left in every way that mattered. My body was still here, but my mind was pointed west, towards something uncluttered. For once, I wasn't the one bracing to be abandoned. Soon she started watching me the way I had watched her, attentive, measuring. Her questions came in gentle shapes over breakfast. "Sleep all right? Something on your mind?" I kept my answers short, then stopped giving them at all, just kissed her cheek before leaving. She didn't wear it well. For years, she'd set the temperature in this house, cold when she wanted distance, warm when it suited her. Now I carried my own weather, and it unsettled her. One morning, I came in from a run, sweat cooling along my back, to find her at the counter pretending to browse recipes she'd never make. She glanced at me and said, with a thin, assessing smile, "You've got a glow lately." I pressed the towel to my face, then gave her the faintest shrug. "Exercise has a way of clearing the mind." "Clearing what?" she asked, but I was already halfway up the stairs. At first, she didn't press. She liked to imagine herself as subtle, a quiet conductor pulling invisible strings. But lately, his influence was seeping into her, widening the hairline fractures. The more he urged her on, the less carefully she wore her mask. One evening after dinner, she leaned against the doorway, tilting her head. "Are you seeing someone?" she asked, the words dangling between us like a dare. I smiled, a small polite thing. "Would that trouble you?" Her laugh was airy and over-rehearsed. "I mean, you've been different. I notice these things." "I'm just trying to be more present," I said, brushing past her toward my office. The irony almost made me laugh. She'd never noticed when I made her tea during migraines, or folded her sweaters the way she liked, or took her car in when it made that noise she couldn't describe. But now that I was quieter, stiller, less accessible, suddenly she noticed. A few days later, I came home early to find her in my office. She spun around when the door clicked shut. "Just sorting the mail," she said, clutching a stack of untouched envelopes. "Thanks," I replied with a calm nod, taking them from her hands. Her lips lifted in a faint smile, but her eyes drifted toward the shelf behind me, the one with the small drawer where I kept the memory cards. Angela was beginning to show her restlessness. She hadn't confessed anything, but her composure had shifted from confident to cornered. That night at dinner, she circled back to my comings and goings. Where had I been? Who had I met? "Errands," I said. "Every day?" I nodded. "There's always something that needs doing." She tried to sound playful, but her fingers drummed against her wine glass, betraying her. By then, I had already watched her lover on my cameras 3 more times. He was always late, always asking for something. Once he said, "You think he knows?" Her reply came too quickly. "No, it's David. He trusts me." That was when I understood. She didn't just underestimate me. She relied on me staying small, predictable, and contained. But I wasn't that anymore. The house had become a stage, and I had reclaimed the script. She kept trying to anticipate my next move, but I offered her nothing. Silence, I found, weighed more than any outburst could. After midnight, the real Angela emerged. The one who whispered instead of smiled, who strategized instead of soothed. I could read her now. The subtle drop of her shoulders before she picked up the phone, the glance toward the hallway, even though I never came that way at that hour. As if she still feared the ghost of the man who once asked where she was going. That night's recording began with a yawn. She brushed her teeth, turned off her lamp, then switched it back on minutes later. The phone buzzed. She answered on the second ring. His voice was clearer this time. "You said you'd talk to him about the money." Angela rolled onto her side. "I know I will." "When?" he pressed. "We can't just sit on this. The lease is up next month." She closed her eyes as if a pause could make it vanish. "David's distracted. He's not in the best place right now." In my office, I smiled to myself. Not in the best place? I was in the best place I'd been in years, just not for her. "You told me he'd go for it if it sounded like a joint investment. Something about rentals. Diversifying," the man reminded her. Angela sat up, irritation creeping into her voice. "Do you want me to ask outright? That's how this falls apart?" A flash of fear showed in her expression. "I'm saying this can't go on forever. If we're serious, we need resources. I can't stay hidden," he said, sharper now. Angela bit her lower lip. "I've been building this for months. You think I don't want out?" "You don't act like it," he shot back. She flinched. His voice softened. "I love you, but if this is real, we need leverage, security. Otherwise, I'm just a secret." Her gaze fixed on the far wall. "I'll handle it," she said finally. When the call ended, she didn't lie down. She just sat there, weighed down by the shape of her own choices. I replayed the footage, not from doubt, but to savor it. The hesitation in her tone, the faint quiver. She wasn't split between 2 loves. She was trapped between herself and the cost of her own schemes. The next morning, she was gentler. She made my coffee without being asked, something she hadn't done in years. She wore my favorite robe, rested her head on my shoulder like it was 2015 again. I let her. "What are you working on today?" she asked softly. "Just tying up some loose ends." Her eyes searched mine. "Financial things?" "Some. Why?" A thin smile. "Just curious." It wasn't curiosity. It was confinement. That afternoon, I watched from my office window as she sat in her car, phone pressed to her ear, speaking without moving her lips much. She was stalling him, but his patience was running thin. The revealing detail? She hadn't breathed a word about money to me, not even hinted. She was waiting for me to open that door, or to break and plead with her. Neither would happen. The longer she delayed, the deeper she sank into her own trap. As for me, I was simply the quiet man bringing her coffee, watching from a safe distance as she unraveled. She still believed it was her game. She still believed she held the strings. I had been distant, but never cruel. Gentle, but never inviting. And somewhere between his urgency and my unreadable calm, Angela began reaching again. "We haven't gone anywhere in forever," she said one night, tracing her finger along the rim of her glass. "Maybe we should, just the two of us. A weekend." I looked up from my book. "That sounds good." Her smile widened, as if she had cracked my code. She thought she'd won. I booked it. A small cabin 3 hours north, remote, snow-threaded trails, a fireplace we'd have to tend ourselves. Angela called it charming, romantic. For me, it was deliberate, surgical. We arrived just before sunset on Friday. The narrow road was only half cleared, the air crisp and still. The cabin looked like it belonged on a postcard, rough timber, golden light, the scent of pine and thyme drifting on the wind. Angela hummed as she unpacked, draped in an oversized sweater that once meant warmth. "How's the view?" she called from the deck. "Clearer than ever," I answered. That night we cooked together. Nothing elaborate, just soup and grilled cheese, the way we had in our first apartment, back when everything seemed easier. She moved through the kitchen as though nothing had frayed. It was as if the late-night phone calls had never existed. No secret entrances, no convenient lies borrowed from elsewhere. I poured wine into 2 glasses. "To us," she said, lifting hers. I tapped mine lightly against it, wearing a calm smile that startled even me with its composure. "To honesty." She hesitated just long enough to betray something before swallowing. Later, we ended up in front of the fire. She leaned into me, her head resting on my chest, neither of us speaking. The only sound was the soft crack and hiss of burning logs. Her breathing slowed into something serene. She thought she owned that moment. But I was watching the way the fire's shadows slid and twisted on the walls, beautiful, fleeting, always shifting. At last, she spoke. "I've missed this," she said. I let the quiet stretch before answering. My voice was soft when I finally did. "How are things with our finances?" She stiffened. Not much, but enough. "What do you mean?" Her tone tried for casual. "Just wondering. We've been eating out a lot. Heating costs are high. I saw a couple charges I didn't recognize." Her gaze stayed locked on the flames. "Nothing big? Groceries? Things for the house?" I nodded. "I trust you, always have." That word, trust, sat between us like something sharp. She laced her fingers through mine. "We're okay, right?" I studied her face, one I'd woken beside more times than I could count. Now it felt staged, lit just right for effect. There was the faintest flicker in her eyes, a microsecond's delay in her smile. "We will be," I said. Later, I stepped outside for firewood. The snow cut at my skin, cold and bracing. I didn't wander far, just far enough to feel the chill sink into me until the cabin's warmth was only a memory. The logs were damp but usable. I paused, looking up at the indifferent stars. When I came back in, Angela was sitting on the rug with her phone. She slipped it away quickly. "See anything out there?" she asked. I shook my head, brushing snow from my coat. "Just air." Inside my thoughts, silence. Loud, relentless silence. The heat of the cabin pressed against me, heavy. Angela had fed the fire, coaxing it higher. Her cheeks were flushed, maybe from warmth, maybe from guilt. She smiled. "Perfect timing, the fire's just right now." I set the wood down and watched her through my breath's haze. For a second, her smile faltered, like a structure leaning but not yet collapsed. "You've always liked fire," I said. She gave a small, uneasy laugh. "It's comforting, isn't it?" I nodded. "Or revealing." Her head tilted the way it used to when she suspected my words carried more than I was saying. "David," she asked slowly, "what's going on?" I moved to the window, pulling back the curtain. Snow drifted past the glass, steady and unhurried, every flake part of something larger. No cell signal, no neighbors, just us and the truths we'd smuggled in with us. "How long?" I asked evenly. She blinked. "What?" "You heard me." Angela straightened. "David, if this is about—" "It is." I cut in. And I already know. I just need the number. She opened her mouth, shut it, whispered, 6 months. The quiet afterward felt alive. The fire cracked once, reluctantly. She sank to the rug as if her legs had lost their strength. I didn't plan it, she said quickly. It just happened. At first he was just someone to talk to. Then it became more. I stayed still. No pacing, no dramatics, just watching. And the money? Her head jerked up. What money? I waited. She picked at her sleeve. He said we should think about the future, about leaving. He wanted me to push for the joint account. Transfers. Have you? She looked away. Number not yet. But you intended to. Her eyes filled. I didn't mean for it to get this far. It started as an escape. Then I felt trapped. Trapped? She nodded, her voice trembling. You were always calm, always steady. I thought you didn't need me. And he made me feel wanted. It wasn't love, not guilt, not even regret, just need, tangled with desire, like vines hiding barbed wire. I tossed another log into the fire. So you tried to undo the one person who stayed, silently, completely, because I didn't shout for you? Her shoulders shook. Do you want to see them? I asked. Her brow furrowed. What? The recordings. Her face drained. I didn't explain. She broke, not in a way that asks for comfort, but the kind that comes when the last beam gives way. I'm sorry, she cried. I didn't know how to stop. I didn't know how to come back. You're not coming back, I said quietly. Her eyes were hollow when she asked, What are you going to do? I didn't answer, because I didn't know yet. What I did know was that this was no longer about forgiveness. It was about truth and the weight she would now carry alone. The drive home was silent. Angela stared out at the forest as though it might show her a version of herself untouched by last night. She cried once, softly. I kept my hands on the wheel, eyes forward, letting the quiet speak for me. At home, I carried in the bags, placed a glass of water in front of her, and went straight to my office, closed the door. It was time. By 9 the next morning, I was in a lawyer's office. Glass walls, sharp lines, a space built to separate lives neatly. The receptionist's smile was too wide. The coffee was bitter. Robert Chase, the man behind the desk, looked like someone who had ended plenty of marriages and slept soundly afterward. Let's talk damage control, I said, taking the seat across from him. His brow rose. Infidelity? Among other things. I set down the folder. Flash drives, passwords, bank records, every call, every whisper, every lie. He didn't flinch, just started to read. Do you want to walk away with peace or with power? He asked without looking up. Both, I said, but if I have to choose power. A faint smile crossed his lips. Then we move fast, and in the next hour we planned everything. Every shared account was flagged for closure. The joint ones split and reassigned. He gave me the number of a digital forensics expert, the kind of professional who could scrub her name from anything I didn't want her tied to again. I stayed completely still, didn't shift, didn't blink. The process felt like surgery. Clean cuts, no wasted movement, no theatrics. By the time I left his office, I didn't feel like a man escaping a collapse. I felt like the one deciding which embers to extinguish and which to leave burning until they consumed what was left. That afternoon, I changed every password, streaming accounts, banking logins, cloud drives, not because I had to, but because I could, because the man she thought would slip away quietly had only been biding his time. Angela never asked outright where I'd been, but she started appearing in doorways more often, lingering in the hall outside my office as if the threshold itself might answer her questions. That night, she cooked roast chicken with rosemary potatoes, the exact dinner we'd shared the evening we signed the papers for our house. It was a small reach toward a past that no longer existed. You've been keeping yourself busy, she said, her tone light. I sipped my water. Just closing out a few things. Anything I should know about? Not anymore. Later in bed, she brushed her fingers along my arm. I didn't pull away, but I didn't return it either. I lay still, breathing evenly, waiting. She was unraveling now without words, no pleading, no explanations, only the heavy quiet of someone realizing the fight was already over. And me? I'd never felt steadier. The night before the court date, she tried again. I stepped into a house scented with jasmine oil, the diffuser humming for the first time in years. Soft jazz curled through the air. Our bedroom glowed under dimmed light, gold shadows falling across the bed as if we'd slipped into an unbroken version of our past. She stood barefoot at the foot of the bed, draped in a deep red silk I'd never seen before. "Do you remember this song?" she asked. I didn't answer. She moved closer. "I bought this today. Thought maybe you'd remember why you loved me." The words were practiced, polished, too late. I let my eyes travel over her once before meeting her gaze. Silk's a waste for a burial. Her lips parted like she'd been struck. I walked past her, hung up my coat, and began brushing my teeth. She didn't speak again that night. The courthouse felt colder than the air outside allowed. Muted walls, cushioned seats, lawyers murmuring over paperwork like it was a grocery list instead of the debris of lives. Angela wore navy, her hair pulled back tight, her face bare of makeup. Her attorney sorted through documents with a look that carried sympathy without conviction. My lawyer set a stack before the judge. Recordings, photographs, bank statements. "Your Honor," Robert began, "we allege not only infidelity but calculated fraud, deliberate concealment of assets, and misrepresentation of intent." Angela's lawyer tried to interrupt. "We're asking for mediation." The judge lifted a hand. "Let him continue." When the audio played, her voice calling me her fallback while topping off a glass her lover had just set down, no one gasped. They didn't have to. Angela sank into her seat, gripping the armrest as though pressure could reverse time. She never met my eyes. Her lover never came, didn't testify, didn't stand beside her. She faced the silence she thought she could escape. The decision came plainly. Assets awarded to me, accounts restructured, minimal support. She nodded like someone repeating a lesson she no longer believed. In the hallway, she passed me slowly, heels soundless on polished stone. "David," she whispered, I don't know who I am without us." I looked at her one last time, not with anger, not with pity, but with certainty. That's the problem. Her eyes fluttered. Her lips trembled. Then she walked away. No more games, no more disguises, only the empty echo of what she'd wagered and lost, not because I took it, but because she'd traded it for far less than it was worth. Denver's air felt different. It wasn't just the altitude, though that took some adjusting, but the stillness, the way the city let you breathe without demanding to know which version of yourself you'd brought along. I rented a bright, modest two-bedroom downtown with real hardwood floors and a cafe downstairs that spun vinyl every morning at 8. Most days I sit there with a black coffee, watching sunlight slide over the skyline. Her name is Marin. We met 3 months ago in a bookstore, both reaching for the same biography. She teased me about curiosity. I told her she should take it. She said I couldn't flirt until I'd at least finished the second chapter. We laughed, the unforced kind. Marin is quiet in a way that feels intentional, not hollow. She doesn't rush to fill silences. We can walk for blocks without talking, and somehow that feels like progress. I've told her little about Angela, not because I'm hiding anything, but because she's never pried. Her questions live in the present, the books I like, how I take my coffee, the small preferences I'd once forgotten I had. This morning, an email slid into my inbox, sterile subject line, case update, 2024, DI 3417, Chambers v. Chambers, bankruptcy filed final. She'd burned through everything. I read it once, then deleted it. "Bad news?" Marin asked over her mug. I shook my head. "Nothing that matters." And it was true. Here's what I've learned. Recovery isn't always fireworks or some triumphant shout. Sometimes it's realizing you haven't thought of the past until someone else mentions it. Sometimes it's choosing not to look, not to dig for closure from someone who wouldn't recognize it if they saw it. Angela taught me that silence can cut deep, but also that silence, when chosen, can be strength. This past year had nights I lay awake wondering how I'd missed the signs, and days where I felt stripped bare. But slowly, better days arrived, quiet as spring, one green blade at a time. Real change doesn't crash through the door, it seeps in, steady and certain. And when I look at Marin now, smiling into her coffee, I don't see the woman who rescued me. I see the man I had to become to meet her. Not a fallback, not a safe bet, but a man who finally understands his own worth. And that's everything.